There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud, what women are actually talking about on Friday, the 10th of November. I'm Holly Wainwright.
I'm Mia Freedman.
And I'm Claire Murphy, filling in for another Stevens again on a Friday. Exciting.
Oh, Jessie is still poorly.
Oh.
It's not funny. It's a little bit funny.
We're laughing a bit, Murphy, because we were saying on Wednesday that every working mother knows this. You come back to work, you make it through one day, everything goes to shit.
Yeah, because babies give 0 Fs about your schedule and what's going on in your life.
And then you get their germs.
Yes,
Exactly.
you do.
Anyway, Claire Murphy, as always, a joy to have you, so thank you for filling in. On the show today, don't freak out, but a 4-day week is coming to a whole lot of Australian schools. Also, just in case you thought that our Mary had escaped the princess curse, let us help you unpack her very bad week. And our best and worst, which include a tricky ethical backflip and a cup-filling night out. But first, Claire Murphy.
In case you missed it, guys, Omegle died.
What's a meagle?
Yeah,
It
good
sounds
question.
like some kind of pet.
It to me sounds like Smeagol, the character from Lord of the Rings, but it could almost be aligned with that in its creepiness factor because for 14 years it's a website that has existed out there in the internet ether, which was loosely based on, I don't know if you remember chat roulette.
Oh, yes.
Back in the day where you could just like randomly connect with somebody wherever in the world and you would just laugh at whatever it is what they were doing or have a conversation.
Teenagers used to do it. It was very rude.
Exactly. Well, Omegle is not much different and it's a very similar setup that you were randomly connected with other humans anywhere around the globe. And the guy who created it was all like philanthropical, like, you know, if the internet is now the global village, then Omegle's like walking down the street and just saying hi to random strangers as you walk along, right?
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
Except they were usually men masturbating.
100% all the time. And those men could be masturbating at children, you know,
Oh,
who
God.
loved Omegle because it was like, ooh, this is a little bit naughty and thrilling. So they would get together at like sleepover parties.
Oh, I would have done that.
So would I. And even my colleagues today in the Mamamia office have all been like, oh, this is what we used to do before a big night out. Like we'd preload and then go on Omegle, which is a terrible dual thing to do. To get very serious, it really facilitated pedophiles for a long time. And it faced
Yeah.
a ton of lawsuits, all of which the founder is like, I can't keep doing this. I can't have a heart attack by the time I'm 30. And it's like, we are all crying big tears for you and the death of your awful, terrible website.
Kids of Australia, how do you all feel about just doing 4 days a week at school? Now, parents, how do you feel about the kids only doing 4 days?
Working from home is the dream for many people, and now kids want in on it. And that's why the 4-day week could be coming to a school near you. The school week is set to change drastically for some students and parents in 2024 because next year, Queensland public schools, both primary and high school, have been given the green light to introduce flexible class schedules, which include a 4-day week and shorter days. This new setup could see students study at home independently 1 day per week. I'm sorry, I'm triggered. Homeschooling. Home learning, whatever you call it.
Mm-hmm.
Or in some cases, even compress their school hours over fewer days. According to the Department of Education's blueprint, the reasons for allowing schools to change class times and shorten the school week include teacher availability as well as student and staff well-being and engagement. Claire, is this serious? As if it's not hard enough already for parents with school starting at 9 and finishing at 3 and having 12 weeks of holidays a year. I mean, talk about school maths. It doesn't add up. How would a 4-day week work?
Well, it's interesting because when we hear 4-day week, we immediately panic because we expect now every kid's going to be home on a Friday and we're going to have to figure out what childcare is going to happen in that time, right? That is not how it's going to look. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of that, the 4-day week has been bandied around quite a bit in the last few years. There's a lot of studies that have shown that a 4-day work week in the work environment creates more productive workers. It's actually been beneficial for staff turnover because people tend to not quit jobs and move elsewhere if they feel burned out. Like there's lots of positives to a 4-day work week, but the practicalities of a 4-day work week are still being ironed out. So this doesn't mean that like every kid has the same day off forever. What it means is like they might not go on a Friday, but they might also not go on a Tuesday. They might have their lessons just for less time in the day.
What are parents meant to do?
As I understand it, it's kind of like school from home. So they're talking about Wednesday, for example, being a bit like in the office, nominated work from home day.
Sorry, can we just stop for a second? Because I don't know about you, but if there was a expected to work from home day during high school, I sure as hell would not be doing any schoolwork.
That's a whole other facet of this, right? But that's kind of the idea, is they're saying like one day a week, kids could go to school, but also they could stay at home. So it's like flexible working, but for school kids. That's how I understand it, right, Murphy?
It is, but also too, so let's be honest here, we don't all see school as the wondrous educational institution that it can be, but also it is a form of childcare for us, right? Because we currently work around the vaguely 9 to 3 kind of day. Obviously, that's not the same for everybody. So when we hear 4-day week and we hear kids are going to be working from home, we then panic because it's like, what am I going to do in that time that they are at home, and what is the expectation that I contribute to the education of my child whilst they're trying to learn from home? Am I supposed to be overseeing that? Because as you very rightly said, triggered, many of us did that during the pandemic lockdowns and had us freaking out. But they're weighing up the benefits of doing this for kids and for teachers, and eventually I guess we'll see that filter through to the workplace as well, because they're going to have to evolve along with school hours if this is the case. Otherwise, who knows what we're going to do after that? Are we all going to be paying for extra childcare? But you can still send your kid to school on one of those days if you have to, from what I understand.
I think you nailed it before, Murphy, when you said parents see school as a form of childcare. I don't mean across the board we do, and that's a good or bad thing. But this was really at the fore during all the COVID arguments about schools opening and closing, right? I remember a lot of teachers sort of pointing out that we are not just here to look after your kids. That's not what we do. But the reality for working parents is we need someone to be looking after the kids. So the interesting thing about this is, remember a few weeks ago we were talking about teachers and the discipline issues in school. And I said, and I got a lot of criticism for it, and fair enough, that I think there is value and merit in the fact that at some point we are going to have to evolve how school works. And just because it's always been the way that it is now, 5 days a week between this time and this time, it doesn't mean that we just have to accept that's what it should look like. Maybe we do have to accept at some point that the world has changed a lot and kids have changed a lot. And in a digital learning environment, why shouldn't we re-examine the rules? The problem is, of course, is that you can't re-examine the rules for one massive part of the way our society functions without looking at it for others. So it wouldn't be a big deal for me personally at the age that my kids are at now, because they don't need constant supervision. If they did have a day when they come home at lunchtime and are meant to do some assignments in the afternoon, it probably wouldn't entirely derail my life. But 5 years ago, this would have had me setting my hair on fire. And we know from the comments when we ran a story about it on Mamamia yesterday that that's exactly how so many parents feel, is they're like, what am I supposed to do with that time? So it's all well and good us saying, well, school isn't childcare. But if we're expected to be working, which we are, these things have to change together, right?
I keep thinking I'm missing something in this story, because no matter which way you cut it, first of all, to be employed, you need to know where your children are in a predictable way. So if it's like this term, we're having Friday afternoons off, and then, next year it's going to be Thursday mornings, that makes things very, very hard for parents. And I would also just say, until your kids get to high school, and even for some kids once they're in high school, if they're home, they need an adult to be home with them. Unless you are the type of worker who is also able to be at home, which is knowledge workers, nurses can't say, oh, I'm going to work from home. 100%. Teachers can't say, I'm going to work from home. Bus drivers can't say, I'm going to work from home. So to me, this is potentially really discriminatory, and also it penalises either single parent families where that parent needs to be out, or in most cases, every adult in a household needs to be out working during the day.
There was a really interesting quote I found in the Brisbane Times when I was reading this from a university professor who'd experienced this when she lived in France, because apparently lots of other countries do this. They have non-school days. And she said that when she lived in France with her kid, Wednesdays were the non-school day, and they were usually used for extracurricular activities like art or sport. But the thing is, as she pointed out, in this model, the parents who can afford to have those extracurricular activities look after their kids, in inverted commas, during that time are advantaged. The parents who can afford not to be out working on that Wednesday are advantaged. So it is definitely a kind of rich get richer situation, if that's what it's like. But I imagine that probably how most state schools would operate this is that Wednesday, for example, and this is what some of the reporting is saying. I also think we have to note that the Education Minister in Queensland is called Grace, which is the best name ever. What Grace has been saying is that if it was Wednesday, for example, there would be extracurricular things at school and study groups available at school for the kids who do need to go. So again, it's back to that kind of straddled COVID style, you know, if you have to send your kid, you send your kid. If you can afford to be having them that day, like doing French lessons, you know, and having a croissant then in the French Quarter, then you do.
In defense of this, though, I mean, the work day has evolved since there was a work day, right? So if we didn't evolve a work day or a school day, we would still be, you know, working hours with no end before they introduced the 8-hour workday. Or, you know, we would be working 7 days a week before they introduced the 5-day work week. So it has to evolve somehow and in some way, because obviously 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, doesn't work for everybody as far as school hours go. And as we know, the role of teachers has changed and evolved over that time too. So we have to then figure out what this new iteration of the work life and school life and the balance looks like. And the only way we can do that is to kind of test and trial it. And these guys are just going to be the guinea pigs, I guess, and we'll learn a lot from it.
Claire, you mentioned the 5-day school week doesn't work for everyone. By doesn't work, do you mean they don't want to go?
No, it's that it obviously has to evolve for the way that we teach kids, right? And we've seen the school year evolve for many different kids who go to different types of schools, technical colleges, arts and, you know, all those kinds of things with an increased focus on STEM, for example. We could be changing the way that kids learn, and that doesn't necessarily mean sitting in a classroom all the time because we know that that doesn't also suit every kid. The schooling system is like a pipe, and you need to squeeze every kid through that pipe regardless of whether they're a circle or not, right? And so we have to evolve what school looks like, not to suit every single individual because that's just not possible, but we have to evolve it in a way that it actually teaches kids how to exist in the world and how to, you know, evolve as a human being. So it doesn't suit everybody. But in saying that, we just need the test cases to teach us what that looks like. And that's what Queensland is right now, going to teach us some things.
Princess Mary's had one of those weeks. And depending on your perspective, it's either all her husband's fault or all the media's fault. Before I dive into this story, I couldn't help but think that I might not have been allowed to talk about it at all if Jessie wasn't sick today.
Oh, do you have a no Princess Mary policy when Jessie's here?
Jessie doesn't like royal stories. And one of the things that's been really upsetting for me is that while she was away, there weren't any royal stories. And I wanted her to be back today so I could torture her with this one. But anyway, she probably would have protested it. But here we go. The reason that we're talking about this is it's on every news site homepage at the moment and people are clicking it like crazy. So we wanted to address it for you. Let's be clear, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. We'll get to that in a second. What's happened is a Spanish magazine called Lecturas published pictures and an extensive story this week about how Mary's husband, who's Denmark's Prince Fredrick, in case anybody had forgotten that, was hanging out in Madrid with another woman. She is described as an aristocrat and actress. She's from Mexico, and she's called, delightfully, honestly, this story writes itself, Genoveva Casanova. Now, Fred apparently was in Spain on a private trip and described as going there to enjoy art exhibitions, watching flamenco and visit new restaurants, which I'm like, that sounds ace. This magazine reported that he and Genevieve, and they did have photos of them walking down the street together, went out for dinner, went to an art exhibition and stayed out for dinner until 1 a.m. And I think this is contested, but spent the night at Genevieve's home. Now, immediately, Genevieve came out and denied rumours of an affair. She told Spanish magazine Hola, which is the Hello magazine for Europe, any statement of this type is not only completely untrue, but also distorts the facts in a malicious manner. This is already in the hands of my lawyers, who will take care of the pertinent steps to protect my right to honour, truth and privacy. Meanwhile, Princess Mary, the reason that this has been very awkward for her is that when this broke, which was on about Wednesday this week, she and Fred are in the middle of hosting the King and Queen of Spain in Denmark. So they had all those like public events that you have when you've got a royal tour. So a dinner and a go to a charity thing and so she couldn't just stay in bed and wait for the storm to pass. She had to go out and, as all the tabloid reports have said, put on a brave face. For a while, there was a dignified silence, but then the royals have released a statement because they've obviously felt they've got to address it, saying, "We have maintained a policy for years of not commenting or confirming any details relating to private matters. In addition, we'd like to emphasise our commitment to respecting the privacy of the members of the royal family, including the Crown Prince." So basically, the very standard royal never complain, never explain. We just don't comment. The thing is, right, Mary and Fred have been married for almost 20 years. They've got 4 kids. And although there have often been rumours that he's the heir, remember, so he's the William, not the Harry in Denmark. He is going to be the king and Mary is going to be the queen. There have often been rumours that, like, Fredrick's quite adventurous and fun-loving, in inverted commas, and likes the company of women. They generally seem to be a very happy, pretty normal, pretty boring kind of couple. But this story won't go away. So my question is, I thought we'd all agreed that being royal was a bit shit, and simultaneously that maybe we've got a bit more sympathy for royal women these days than we appear to be giving Mary. Is this speculation fair enough? Mia Freedman.
I think it is. Having the photos and the facts mean that the speculation is fair enough. Now, she also has the right to get her lawyers involved. They have the right to deny it. But I think when you are paid to be, royalty is like, you're like a public servant at the highest level, and you get to live in castles, you get a lot of perks. There's a test called public interest with news coverage, which is it in the public interest for the people to know this, yes or no? And if you say, is the man who is going to be the king, is it in the public interest to know whether he is possibly cheating on his wife, who is going to be the queen? It would be hard to argue that, no, it's not in the public interest.
I'm interested. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm very interested. But I don't know that it is actually in the public interest.
So back in the days of JFK, right, when he was wildly well known as being wildly indiscreet, had affairs with everyone from Marilyn Monroe to all sorts of people, everybody knew, and there was just an agreement that the media wouldn't publish that information. Why? Should we have known that Charles was having the affair with Camilla?
I would say not, because, again, I'm interested. But one of the things that's very much come out as you dig into all the Charles and Camilla stuff is that, you know, royals probably always had affairs. You know, there's all those stories about how Camilla's grandma was his grandfather's mistress or
Prince
whatever.
Philip, yeah.
It doesn't alter their job. I think you could argue slightly different for politicians because they're open to blackmail. It could compromise them in different ways. But really, does it make me a better or worse king if I have sex with somebody who isn't my wife? I'm not saying that Fredrick is doing that, but if it was, does that impact my ability to do my job as a king? Claire Murphy.
I feel like the fact that your job is the king puts you in a very different league to a lot of other people. There's so much that goes into that. You know, your country's taxpayer dollars pay some of your salary. You hold yourself up as, you know, this perfect ideal of what the best human in your entire country looks and behaves like. You live in the most lavish, amazing places because you're by birth apparently have the right to do so. And it feels like you kind of need to justify that. And your justification is by living a good and just life. And if you're not living that good and just life, and I mean by having an affair, allegedly, then it feels like the people who you are telling that this is the best and most amazing person in your country who is by birth supposed to lead you gets to be criticised for that.
Oh, my God. I don't think I buy that. I don't think that necessarily monogamy is the most important virtue, whether or not you're a good person.
I don't think it's the most important virtue. I think it's part of that. Like they expect if you are a married person and you have a wife and beautiful children that you would honour her and you would respect that, because if you are dishonouring your own family, who's to say you won't dishonour the whole role as king? It goes like, and obviously there's more than that. There's other things that he does and would hopefully, not say those things. But I feel like it's a judge of character, and being the king is a whole character.
I wouldn't say the morality thing necessarily, because you never know what goes on in a couple. And we're not speaking about anyone specifically here at all. But there are no doubt, as you've said, in royal families, the British royal family, for example, over various generations, there was a complete understanding that that was fine. Like some people are fine with it. Like you don't know who's doing what and who knows about what. And maybe people have an arrangement and they're both completely fine with it. So I don't have a moral problem with it. My question is, so he flies to Spain on his own. He walks down the street with this famous woman. So she's a celebrity. She's 47. She's like a Sonia Kruger kind of a figure. And they go to a restaurant, they're seen, right? So what are you meant to do if you are a journalist? And yes, you're a gossip journalist. You get wind of this. These are two public figures who are seen in public together. If you then don't report that, are you then complicit in helping disguise something that's happening in plain sight? Like no phones were tapped in the reporting of this story.
No, of course not. But the immediate insinuation that this is a romantic affair is not necessarily true, right? Like what we know for sure is that he walked down the street with her because there are photos of it. Like we don't necessarily know that there's anything dodgy about that. I think that we are invested in thinking that Prince Fredrick might not be as perfect as he seems. And I think people have been trying to catch him out, in inverted commas, for a long time. Not that I'm saying that I believe him not to be, because all indications are that that is a really happy relationship. In terms of famous people, rich people, certainly royals, who we watch their relationships.
But how would you know that whole? How would you have a clue about that?
What I mean is there are not endless affair rumours. There have been mutterings over time that, he likes to party. Like when I worked at Women's Day, which is a long time ago, we used to run stories that were kind of like, he likes to go out to bars and talk to ladies, but there was never anything concrete. There was never anything real. So what I mean is in the 20 years they've been married, there have not been particular scandals, dramas. They've got 4 kids. They seem to be really normal, down-to-earth people. Scandi royals are like that. They can walk down the street, all of those things. And I think that we actually would almost like it if we could find out that that relationship was not as good as it looks, because we have learnt through Diana, through Meghan, through all of the story that being a royal is awful. And maybe Mary's story is a bit too neat, because it really does seem like she randomly met this guy in a bar in Sydney during the 2000 Olympics, and everything since then has been plain sailing. And maybe some of us are like, that doesn't seem fair. That seems a bit too good to be true.
I can totally see that. But at the same time, I feel like, and I might be a bit basic in thinking this, but when somebody tells me I've got a big secret but I'm not going to tell you, I immediately need to know what it is. And it's like when they say there's all these allegations about him being unfaithful, we are not commenting. We never comment about this. That whole thing, it just makes me so much more invested in knowing what the truth is.
Well, what do you think they should say?
I feel like if Mary just kind of was allowed to just say, oh, God, guys, stop giving a shit about my marriage. I'm fine. Like just something really, I don't need to know the details of whether he had an affair or not even. But if I felt like Mary had the ability.
She doesn't have a voice. Have you not noticed that? Ever since she got married and left Australia, she's given one interview, I think, to like Australian Vogue, which was incredibly sanitized. I would just say one more thing. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt, and it's completely innocent, right? Out of respect to my partner and knowing, like he's not new to being famous, right? He was born a royal. He's always had this scrutiny. Being seen in public with a single woman who is not your wife, you know what the rumours are going to go.
You sound like Mike Pence.
to.
You sound like this idea of like married men should not be alone with single women. Like, honestly, come on.
No.
I would not be upset if Brent was in Sydney and he had dinner with one of his female friends.
Yeah, but then you can come out and say,
But look at
that's
what's
one of Brent's
happened.
mates. That's totally fine. I know everything about it. Don't worry about it. But we don't know. Like, Mary just has to kind of sit back and smile nicely.
Yeah.
And then we all sit there and fill in the blanks. Like, is she mad? Is she happy? Is she unhappy?
There's nothing she could say that would change people's minds about the story they want to tell themselves. And also the other reason why royals have always stuck by this never complain, never explain thing, apart from until Prince Harry took a sledgehammer to it with significant force, is because once you start commenting on everything, you have to keep
I agree with
commenting
that.
on every single rumour, which is why we saw a statement this week from Prince Harry. There was a tabloid story that Harry and Meghan were snubbing King Charles's birthday party, and Harry and Meghan, because they do respond to everything, had to come out and go, actually, we weren't invited. And it just is
I agree with
all
that.
so petty and ridiculous. Like, there is some dignity in going, we do not dignify this nonsense.
Nah, give me the
with a
truth.
response.
I love knowing that Harry and Meghan weren't invited. They've just come out and said, that's bullshit. They didn't even invite us. And I'm like, okay, now I understand what's going on
Petty,
here.
petty, petty.
I'm a petty queen. Keep it coming.
Yeah, I'm petty too. Hol, you say it's not fair what I said and that I sound like Mike Pence, who famously won't be in a room alone with a woman. That's to protect him, right? In case the woman says anything, right? As a politician, I can understand that. However, when you are a royal, literally your only job is optics. It's all you have to do. It's not about what you know. It's not about what you think. It's not about the kind of person you are. It is about appearing, dressing up, wearing sashes and crowns and robes, standing on balconies and waving, cutting ribbons. You're literally just appearances. So to not pay attention to the fact that if you do something that optically doesn't look good, that's just not doing your job well.
Yeah, but also we know as well as anybody that the pictures can be misleading. There may have been 5 other people in that group
True.
and they were walking 10 steps behind. They could have been walking into the restaurant together,
So true.
but there were loads of other people at the dinner. Like, I don't know that as a royal or as any high-profile person, it is necessarily my job to debunk every bullshit story just because it looks bad.
Outlouders, if you want to make Mamamia Out Loud part of your routine 5 days a week, or just get more of us in your ears, we release segments on Tuesdays and Thursdays just for Mamamia subscribers. To get the full access, follow the link in the show notes, and a big thank you to all our current subscribers. We love you.
Okay, friends, it is Friday, and that means we are taking a little squeeze back at the week that was with our bests and worst. My worst. Ladies, my husband won't let me get a second dog.
Mine neither.
What
My
is wrong
fake
with
husband.
them? My dog needs a friend. I don't know about Tuna, but Sydney needs a friend.
Where do you live? I'll be in my car. You can have one of mine. Holly, you can have the other one of mine. And then my husband will be stoked because he didn't want any dogs and now we've got 2.
Well, my husband is all like, we have one dog. You know, it's hard enough to find boarding for her when we are away. And like, it's just a pain. And I was like, no, but like having a second dog, it has a friend and then it won't be so needy. That's my thoughts anyway. It'd probably be 10 times worse. But I feel like the men's are against the second dogs. This is unfair.
Brent has the very unreasonable excuse in my mind that he says it's all fine for you wanting a second dog, but you're the one who's in Sydney half the week and doesn't do all the dog care. It's me who'll have to look after them. And I'm like, damn it, that sounds reasonable. Mia, you've had 2 dogs for a while in different configurations. Is 2 dogs twice the work?
It depends what dogs they are. It's at least 1.5 times the work. So there are some economies of scale. It's not no more work. It's like having 2 kids. It's like it's not 100% more work, but it's also not maths. But it's it's a lot. It's a pain, and it depends what kind of dog you get.
But also the only question that
dud.
really needs to be asked here is like, are your dogs happier with 2 of them or one of them?
Yeah, see, that's what I think. I'd like Tuna to have a friend because she's quite an anxious dog, as Mia knows all about anxious dogs. And when we go out and that kind of stuff and she's in the back garden, I feel like she'd be happier if she had a friend. And there are just so many cute dogs on the rescue.
Yes, and on the upside is that you feel less guilty for leaving them alone. And the other upside is that it's really fun to watch their dynamics, because I love that. It's really entertaining watching the dynamics between the two dogs.
I'm going to go and tell my husband that my boss said yes.
And she'll be arriving in an hour and a half with your new dog.
Can't wait. My best for the week is I forget sometimes how soul replenishing a really good girls' night out is. Last Friday night in Newcastle, went out with a bunch of girls and we went to a beautiful restaurant and we just people watched and talked shit and had some wines and some cocktails, and then went back to my friend's house where we kept just talking and sharing and understanding and supporting. And I came home just feeling like my battery was recharged. Like it was just so glorious. If you do not, or if you have not spent time with your girlfriends recently, go and do it. I know that it is a nightmare to sometimes coordinate them all.
It's worth it.
But it is so worth it. Holly Wainwright, what do you got?
My worst this week is actually pretty heavy, and it does touch on suicide. So I'm going to put that out there in case anybody feels the need to skip this bit. But there was a post this week from a man called Dr. Justin Colson. Now, I've interviewed Justin quite a few times when I worked on This Glorious Mess, a parenting show. He's a really well-known parenting expert. He has 6 daughters. You know, he's got a podcast. He posted on Instagram this week to say that his nephew had died on Sunday night. And he wrote, he died by suicide. This post came with a lot of photographs of a very beautiful, not that that's the important part, but young man who looked, to all intents and purposes, full of life, full of potential, full of energy, surfing, laughing, being with his friends, being with his family. Dr. Colson wrote, he was one of the most energetic and delightful kids I knew, kind, fun, laughing. And he went on to say that he'd taken his life on Sunday night while he was staying with his grandparents. So Justin Colson's mum and dad, who found him on Monday morning. His mum was away in Melbourne for a weekend and obviously got the most unimaginable call from her parents about Logan. The thing about Dr. Colson's post, about Justin's post, is that he expressed obviously the absolute horror of this. He also went on to say that there are 9 suicides every single day in Australia, and 7 of those each day are men. And he talked about how the only thing that had been helping him in these few days since this had happened was connection, talking to other people about it, whether they were family members or friends or people who have some experience in this space, like his friend Gus Warland, who has a mental health charity and who called him. And he said, a lot of people say or post or write, I don't have words for this, I can't find words for this. And he was saying, we all have to try and get better at finding the words for these awful moments, because it's connection that can help the people left behind. But also, as Justin wrote in his post, it's social connections that can really help young people who are struggling with mental health. So he wrote this amazing post. We republished it, obviously, with his full permission on Mamamia. He said to us he wants people to talk about this. He wants it shared widely. He wants people to understand that Logan's loss is abhorrent, but actually not something that is so unusual. There aren't many people, I'm sure, listening to this who've been touched by it, and that we do need to talk about it, and we do need to find words in impossible situations to reach out to each other, which I just think is such an important message. If you're struggling, or if anybody you know is struggling, after listening to this and hearing us talk about this, please reach out to Lifeline. It's 13 11 14. Changing gears, my best. Now, I might get some hate for this, but I don't know what's happened to my principles, friends. I don't know what's happened to my deeply held ethical beliefs. On Tuesday, it was the Melbourne Cup. If you were consuming Mamamia content on Tuesday, you probably wouldn't know that, because I mean, you would know that because it's everywhere in the world, but we don't really cover the Melbourne Cup, because over the years that I've worked at Mamamia, which is coming up to a decade, we've really evolved that. Like, we've seen how our audience has turned away from it. I myself have written many think pieces and opinion pieces about how cruel and awful horse racing is, how damaging gambling is. And I believe all that, right?
All right, Holly, we know that you're against the Melbourne Cup. What did you do?
Did you buy a hat?
On Tuesday, I was working from home with Brent. We were both working from home. Literally 5 minutes round the corner from us is our local pub. And it got to like 2:30 and Brent was like, hey, do you want to go around the corner and see the Melbourne Cup? And I was like, I don't agree with the Melbourne Cup, but yes, absolutely. And I stopped what I was doing in a hot minute. I was not dressed up. I did not have a hat on. I was wearing like shorts and a T-shirt. We went round the corner. I had a midi of light beer and I put $10 on the Melbourne Cup. Who even am I? I'm sorry, everybody. I don't know why, but the reason it's my best is that was actually really fun. I won $90 because...
Don't do this at home, kids.
The horse I picked won, which was entirely weird because I don't know anything about it.
What did you pick it based on?
I liked its name.
What was its name?
It was called Without a Fight. I liked its name.
You moved to the country and you changed.
It's
Holly
true.
Wainwright.
All my closely held woke beliefs are crumbling. That's not true. Anyway, I had drank my light beer. I won my money. I went back to work. And I have to say, it was one of the best interludes of my week. And I'm really sorry, everybody.
Also, we do not condone drinking on the job. That is
That's also
entirely a terrible thing to do.
It was her light beer.
Sometimes. I have a recommendation before we go. You can really tell the state of my mental health by the state of my fingers. I've talked about this before. I'm a nervous picker. I pick up my fingers. Sometimes I'll have several fingers bleeding, which is really delightful. So what I need is fidget toys. I've got them everywhere. If you come into Mamamia, my office looks like a kindergarten. I've got them all over my desk. I take them to meetings. I call them my toys. I've got some of them right now in the podcast studio. I've got 2. Actually, I've got 4. They really, really help me. They help me to concentrate. They help me to not pick up my fingers. I'm always looking for new ones because people who like fidgeting with things, there are certain feelings of things, like you got to find your thing, right?
It's a sensory thing.
I like the one in your office that has a switch on it that you can just turn on and off and on and off.
Yeah, that's good too. And I also need things that are small enough to be portable. And I mean, I never hide it, but like a little bit discreet, you know? So I have found a new place to buy them from. It's an Australian small business called Sensory Store. And I've bought a whole lot of new ones. I've got this one with these tiny ball bearings. Not good if you've got little kids around, but it's just so fun. And then I've got another one that's a stick that looks like a vape pen, but that isn't a vape pen, that's got all sorts of little switches and little different textures on it. They have heaps of different ones. If you've got a kid in your life or someone with ADHD or maybe you that just needs some help concentrating, Sensory Store, highly recommend.
Friends, if you are looking for something else to listen to, on yesterday's subscriber episode, Holly, Mia and Elfie, they had, shall we call it nargy-bargy?
Throwdown.
Got quite heated, friends.
Throwdown about Gwyneth's bum.
About Gwyneth Paltrow's new bum selfie in Bustle. They asked the question, is Gwyneth posing in her underwear setting businesswomen back? It was, shall we say, a little heated. A link to that episode will be in the show notes.
Outlouders, come back me up.
No, don't back her up. Back me up. Anyway, thank you for listening to Australia's #1 news and pop culture show. It means the world to us that you're here. This episode was produced by Emeline Gazilas. The assistant producer is Tahli Blackman, with audio production by Leah Porges. And thank you to one very busy Claire Murphy for jumping in with us today.
No, it is my pleasure. Lovely to be here. Thanks, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.
See you soon with your new dog.
When's delivery? Half an hour? Can't wait.
Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and you want to support us, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do it. There's a link in the episode description.